Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Mondays Down South. As you can see, we're missing one of the three this week. He is actually in Virginia, out there for a conference, but I got to see Zebo this weekend, and Alexa came around. So shout out to her as well, and we had a great time catching up. I'm sure he's probably really full eating all the B wings today, so I don't know that he would have been able to think much, even if he was on my podcast today with his favorite spot back. E, how we doing? How's your weekend?
We're doing good. Yeah, good weekend. Caught the Giants Sunday night football game last night. So, it was a good time. I'm not going to say it was like all that exhilarating of an experience for anyone that watched that game, but yeah, a little different this weekend. Good baseball on, and Commanders had probably their biggest game, or at least most hyped game, certainly regular season that I can remember in who knows how long, years. So, yeah, all good, ready to chop it up.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get into the Commanders-Ravens once we get into the more NFL stuff, but I will say I went to a bar with my buddy Dasky. I got to give him a shout out, Andrew Daskalakis from University of South Carolina. And we went to a game in D.C., and it was a Navy Yard at a place called Tom's Watch Bar. And as you alluded to, it was like, probably 75 to 80% Commanders fans, but then there was a pretty decent amount of Baltimore fans, obviously, with it being the D.C. area. And it was epic. We had so many people just kind of going back and forth, and they were doing each other's chants and messing with each other. So it's really nice to see DC football reinvigorated in the way that it is, and rightfully so. It's as opposed to the years where fans were overly optimistic way too early. This is a time where I think the optimism is very justified. So I think that's great. We will dig into that. I definitely want to get your thoughts on the game, but before we do that, today, especially with me and Evan on here and with such quality baseball going on right now, we wanted to bring a little bit of the CS series to light. Of course, my Mets are in there playing the Dodgers, and then we also have the Yankees playing the Guardians. Let me know if that was on your bingo list at the beginning of the year, because I know it certainly wasn't on our baseball preview one. So it's been a good start already. Just game 2 just finished for the Mets Dodgers. Game 1 is going on right now for the Yankees Guardians. So it'll be nice to see what the results are there. But Ev, do you have any initial thoughts before we jump into anything specific?
My initial thought that doesn't have anything to do with the actual series themselves is Major League Baseball. What are we doing having game 2 of a championship series situation, 1 p.m. local time, 4 p.m. East Coast on a Monday? I get it's a sort of a holiday, but I feel like for most people it's not even a holiday.
Yeah.
What are we doing with this scheduling? It was just so weird to see that game played in the middle of broad daylight. And it's not like it's a small market by any means either. This is LA we're talking about. So, with that said, I just read today that the viewership of the baseball postseason is up like 20% this year, which is awesome to see. So maybe I shouldn't give them a hard time for their weird scheduling habits this time of year. And I guess if you put it at night, you got Monday Night Football and like all this other stuff going on. So I'm sure they know what they're doing, but it was just very bizarre. But like you said, interesting matchups. I am glad that we were talking about this a little bit in a group chat earlier, to see that the teams that kind of deserve to be there for the most part made it there. Like the Yankees and Dodgers certainly were like 2 of the best teams in their respective leagues all year long, as was Cleveland, a little less, on the radar, and they had a little rough patch in the middle, but they were pretty much up there from start to finish. And then, the Mets are kind of the outlier, but even them, after the slow start from the first month or 2 of the year, they had you would know the best record in baseball from
starting, I think, like June 3rd-ish, or the first week of June, essentially. Maybe from June 1st, we have the best record in baseball the entire way. So, it definitely it's a very different team now than it was when we first started the year.
Yeah, so it's good to see that this whole weird format and the bye weeks didn't seem to get in the way too much. But yeah, I think Major League Baseball is praying the Yankees win, because either way, the Yankees winning is going to be an insane spectacle, whether it's a Dodgers or Subway Series. So I don't know. I guess we'll dive into the matchups themselves and some kind of
Yeah,
predictions, but those are my high level thoughts.
yeah. I think matchups and predictions are a good way to go. Let's start with the Yankees Guardians, just because the game's happening right now, and I think we'll have more thoughts for Dodgers Mets since we've already had two games. Um, my initial I'll give you my initial perspective. I I agree with you. I'm glad both those teams got there because clearly they had their ups and downs, but like, as you alluded to, they were the best teams in the AL pretty much the entire year, and it's a fun matchup because I think the way the production is handled is a little bit different. I think you have the Cleveland's interesting because you look at their lineup, you look at numbers, right, and it's not like going to blow you out of the water, right? You have your Jose Ramirez's of the world, but the lineup is a lot of names that I'm sure the casual fans wouldn't even know. But at the same time, the creativity of their production is something to you know write home about because I think they find very like smart analytical ways to win. It's what makes them so impressive. And then also, I think they have the best pitcher in the whole series, which that's no knock against Garrett Cole, who obviously has been, terrific throughout his career. But BB, I love that
Oh,
man. I think he is an absolute stud, and I think he is going to make or break the series for him because if he can win his two starts, assuming he gets two, I think that's going to make the difference. So I just want to start with that. We can dig into that more, but I maybe a bit of a hot take, but I want to see what you say about that.
that is a very bold take. Yeah. I do like, they're obviously completely different styles. And the one thing I think this postseason has taught me, partially from a biased lens of why the Orioles have not been successful in the postseason, is everyone used to say, like, the way you win in the postseason is you hit home runs, right? Because it's really hard to string a bunch of hits together against the quality of starting pitching you're going to face.
Mhm.
And maybe that used to be true, but I just don't think that's true in today's game. I really think these like high contact oriented, like put the ball in play, don't strike out, like kind of teams are the ones that end up being more successful.
Mhm.
Just from what I've seen, because like the Orioles, for example, just are so reliant on the home run ball, and then we saw what happens when you run into Kansas City.
Yep.
A team with a good pitching staff that keeps the ball in the ballpark, and you score one run in two games. But a team like Cleveland, like I'm surprised San Diego didn't get through LA. I thought they were going to, but that's another
Yeah.
team that just really puts the ball in play. And creates a lot of havoc on the base paths. But and then the Yankees are going to be more reliant on the home run ball. So it'll be interesting. I think the Cleveland pitching staff, that's definitely a very bold take. I thought you were just going to go with Clase as being the best pitcher in the series, which I would agree with. But I don't know. Bivey's more of a number two for me. He is a stud. He's young. He's got room to grow, but I'm not taking him over Garrett Cole. I can tell you that much, especially in the playoffs. But I don't love Rodon. It looks like he's off to a good start tonight. I'm just not a fan of his at
Mhm.
all. Clark Schmidt is solid, but he's not going to like go six scoreless. He'll give up probably a couple runs, but he'll give you a chance to win. And then it honestly might come down to Luis Heel, who has I think just one start in the series, but he's the kind of guy that could go dominate you for 6 innings, or he could like just get blown
Yeah.
out and give up like 8 runs in 2 innings and give you absolutely not that many, but like he'd give you just completely no chance to win the game. So I think the Guardians are a tricky matchup. Like I said, they're going to put the ball in play and they're going to make some havoc on the base pass. It's
Oh,
disgusting to say this, but it feels like it's the Yankees' year to at least make it to the World Series. But it can be a tough one.
lineup wise, it's weird because yeah, I think both teams are. The Yankees are definitely very top heavy. We know this, but we're getting more production from guys like Claybar and stuff that you didn't get earlier in the year, which will be kind of the make or break thing for me because Soto and Judge are gonna hit. I have no doubt about that. Like they're gonna have their big moments, but I get that it hasn't been the best postseason for Judge, but I do think that they're due for one or two massive moments, right? It's just who they are as superstars. But it's the depth of it. Giancarlo obviously had a good game or two last series, which was massive for them, batting a little bit later. You might need some production out of Jazz. It's really interesting because neither of these lineups are too daunting in the context of 1 to 9. But obviously, you have your pockets that you have to be worried about. So that's really going to be the make or break. One thing that I will say is both these teams have great bullpens. From my I think so. I think they have the names or at least the talent to be good in this series. So I think I just don't know if I like. Maybe you think there's a distinct advantage to one bullpen versus the other. I guess what I'm trying to say is they're on even playing fields. You know what I mean? So that's I think starting pitching and bullpen are almost a wash to me. Like I think both teams kind of have a way to kind of balance each other out there. So I'm focusing on the lineups because it's really like who do I think is going to show up more hitting wise. That's how I look at the series.
Yeah, I have the biggest advantage in the series actually being the bullpens. I
Really?
just personally don't like the Yankees pen at all. They did throw well against Kansas City, but it's like I do like Weaver. Weaver is pitching great right now, and he has like that dog mentality. Tommy Canley's pitching very well.
Mhm.
Clay Holmes has been better lately, but he is a nightmare waiting to happen. And outside of those guys, they really don't have anyone, and they don't have lefties. And the Guardians lineup is super left-handed heavy. Now, granted, it's a lot of
That's a good
contact
point.
hitters that are less prone to lefty on lefty matchups type of thing. That's how I feel it's
I
going to.
worry a little bit about the offense really with Cleveland because, I mean, I say that, but obviously look at the number of games they've won and look at where they are. So I feel like even if the numbers don't look beautiful on paper, like they find a way to produce runs, whether it's a small ball, whether it's just playing smart. Obviously, they have Jose Ramirez up top, but Yankees with Judge and Soto, it's just there's just that excitement factor that is missing. But sometimes it's like you alluded to earlier. If you're the team that's going to go up there and rack up hits at a time where in a series where you have to go, it might go seven, and you have to make the big you know score in the big moments. Sometimes the lineup that's going to be more likely to give you those base hits is harder to stop than the team that's trying to go up there and bop home runs a bunch. The one thing the Yankees benefit from though is although Judge hasn't quite been Aaron Judge of uh, regular season thus far, their power hitters aren't just going to go strike out if they're not hitting home runs, which is what makes those two so daunting. But again, I think it comes down to guys like Giancarlo. Like that's going to make the difference in this series. Um, I don't know. What do
Yep.
you got? What do you got? I'll go with my prediction first. I do agree with you that I think the Yankees are going to get it. And my bias actually, I have no love loss for the Yankees. I never root for them, but my bias this year would love to see the Yankees make it, especially if my Mets can win our series because it would just be so iconic and something that maybe get once every 20, 30 years. So that aspect of it kind of makes me want to see that. So I'm going to say Yankees in seven, but I guess I wouldn't be mad about Francisco Lindor playing his old team in the championship too. So, but I'm going to say Yankees in seven.
I think that's my prediction too. Same games too. But yeah, I think it'll be a good series. I think it could be tricky for the Yankees. But pivot over to the National League. Obviously, we're 2 games in here, 1-1. A couple of somewhat kind of blowouts. The first one and this one maybe tightened up a little bit, but the Mets have it in control the whole game. So it's turned into a 5-game series with the Mets having the home field advantage for analysis purposes. But yeah, this is another one. I don't really know how it's going to go. I think the advantage I think the Mets have is having, like I mentioned with the Yankees, like just like more traditional and good starting pitching. Like every year, the Dodgers are in this mess of not having enough starting pitchers, despite the fact that they spent $500 million, or I don't even know how much money they spent this offseason, but and yet they're still here with basically 2.5 starting pitchers. I'm not sure Walker Buehler even counts as a full starter at this point, but
Yeah.
and the Mets are obviously going to Senga. I didn't watch the game
That was
yesterday,
tough.
but tough spot for him having hardly pitched this year, and then
Yeah.
with the control issues. But I mean, then you can line up Manaea, Severino, and Quintana in any order. That'll be tough, but also the Dodgers just have such a relentless offense. I mean, even today we saw it with the ability to come back, and they don't swing out of the zone a whole lot. Put the ball in play, but can also hit the long ball. You got the star power. Seems like Freddie is healthy enough to play. So I don't know, man. But the Mets just have that momentum right now too. And I was worried they maybe lost it after a couple of off days and the rough first game. That certainly was not the case, coming out and scoring 6 runs or whatever in 2 innings today. So
Mhm.
I don't know. That's my high level opinion, but withholding my prediction for a little bit later.
Yeah, the irony is this feels very anti-Mets, right? Because like for the better part of 2 decades, with the exception of 2015 and maybe like the mid 2000s back in the David Wright era, people just had the assumption that the Mets are going to Mets, right? Like especially in the Wilpon era, where you expect a team that has talent to, leave runners on to, when you lose a game to come out there in the next game and be flat and maybe be a little bit defeated. And the irony has been we've been the polar opposite of that this year. No pun intended. Shout out Polar Bear. We have just been. It's been weird, right? Like as a Mets fan, I'm not used to this. It's like it gets me so like my body doesn't know how to react. You know what I mean? Like my anxiety, my excitement. It's just so different than it's always been, and that's really what it comes down to. Because if you look at talent, it's funny at the beginning of the year. If you told me, first of all, the Mets were going to be in NLCS, I'm not saying I'm not a believer in my team, but with all makeshift things we had to do this year when we got a new GM, a new coach, and then you go in there and you have to construct a starting pitching unit after losing your two of your three main guys over the last year and a half, right? Like you lose DeGrom, then you trade Scherzer, you sign Verlander, then you trade Verlander, and then Senga gets hurt at the very beginning of the year. If you told me we were going to go into the NLCS and have the best rotation, in my opinion, out of all the teams still left in the playoffs, like at least if you're considering depth and the ability to, pitch 4 games in a row with solid pitchers, like I think we have that better than anyone because we're not relying as much on our bullpen, which I'll get to that in a minute. That that is the part that blows my mind. And then the other aspect of it is putting my bias aside. I sat back and I was looking at the lineups and I was looking at like production. You could argue we have. I'm not going to say the best lineup because I don't think that we have the boppers that some of these teams have consistently. You don't have the Otani, Betts, Freeman, Teoscar Hernandez top 4, and obviously Muncy and them are good. But our depth of lineup, at least 1 through 8, 1 through 9, you could argue can hold up against anyone in the context of who do you think is the lineup, especially with guys like Marte and others at the bottom of the lineup just being so consistent and producing in these big spots, getting the base hit, getting on base. Like, we want to talk about Francisco Lindor's grand slam. We want to talk about Mark Vientos' grand slam. But what you got to keep in mind is these guys aren't hitting grand slams without the bottom of your order getting on base, right? So one thing I've really appreciated is it's a top to bottom approach. And I think that's maybe the differentiator for us. We don't rely just purely on Lindor, even though obviously that, he has been our number one guy. So it's just good to see the balance across it. The main concern for me is bullpen. I got to give a huge shout out to David Peterson, though. If especially with us doing the Senga strategy last series where we ended up winning Game 1 against Zach Wheeler, which was huge. On multiple occasions, we had David Peterson coming out of the bullpen, and he's been amazing as a long man. Think of the Colin McHugh for the Astros when they made a championship in one kind of mold, and that aspect has been. Like he has been so terrific for us this year, both as a starter, with us, mid 3 ERA, and then also now as a long man, which isn't just easy to transition to that. So I think that's something we have to look at. That's going to be very make or break for us because when you get to the back end, it is I can't get around the fact that the Dodgers and the other two teams in still left definitely have the better pens. And I need to see Diaz be a little bit quicker to find the zone. He's managed to get out of it without giving up the runs the last 2 games, but I just need to see him hit the strike zone immediately. I think he overdoes it at first and then calms down and gets out of it. If we're going to win this series, he can't always do that because a team like the Dodgers isn't just going to eat that. You know what I mean? So that's my long spiel. But we're going back to New York and we're 1-1. That's my dream scenario. I wasn't against a team as good as the Dodgers in LA. I wasn't expecting us to go in there and go up 2-0. If we did, that would have been incredible. But we, as you alluded to, we have the advantage now. And I do wonder, in the postseason, I'm not saying this is going to happen again, but I do wonder if acclimating to travel and playing in the cold is something the Dodgers have an issue with because it seems like they haven't gotten past the DS in a while. They're in the CS. I'm curious to see what it's going to be like for them to come to city in a bigger ballpark, and the weather's getting a little chillier. So I'm really curious to see how they handle that. So I don't know what your thoughts are there, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I thought today's game I thought was so huge for you guys. To kind of steal that one, I thought the Dodgers would be able to do it with how well the bullpen strategy worked against the Padres. So for the Mets to be able to win this one is huge with, the 3 games in New York, the Dodgers only have one starting pitcher going that I trust. And even Yamamoto is he pitched great against San Diego series, but it's not a 10 out of 10 trust level with him. So, I would feel pretty good about the Mets being able to take, 2 of those games and put themselves in just needing to split in LA or, hey, even taking them all 3. But I think the bullpen strategy is interesting. I figured it out today that obviously with the Dodgers situation, right, you have Yamamoto and Flaherty who pitched great in Game 1. Those are your 2 guys you trust. And then Buehler's going to have to start a game, which is fine. And then they're going to stack the bullpen games on days where they have an off day to follow it, is what I figured out, which makes a lot of sense because they kind of have 6 really good relievers they can trust.
Yeah.
which gets now that Vesia being out is huge because that was their other really stud lefty, and obviously they just need that length. But today I thought it was odd going to Landon Knack,
He is
where
though.
what's that?
He's one of the only guys who can throw multiple innings though. Like,
Well, and yeah, no, for sure. And I just didn't think they needed that. Like after game one, where Jack goes, 7 innings, and you're blowing him out. So I think the only leverage reliever they threw is Daniel Hudson for an inning. And since it's only a 2-game, it's only 2 games without an off day. You have your entire pen available. You have 6 guys. Like you'll need a 7th guy in there, but like Hudson, Trinan, Kopech, Bonda, Phillips,
it's
getting
ridiculous.
one other guy, like that can get you almost the entire game, as it did in that Padres game. So I just thought it was an odd move going to Landon Knack, unless you needed. I mean, they tried to sneak it in there, I think.
I think he's
Early.
been, in his defense, he's been pretty like
Sure.
decent as of late. And the other thing is, if you can at least get 2 innings out of him, you're right. Yeah, they have a day off, but then we play Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, back to back to back in Citi Field. So if you burn, let's say not burn, but if you use half those high leverage guys, and also you give our guys at bats against them, and we end up winning this game, and then you give us 3 games at home where you've used so much of your pen, whereas we haven't relied as much on our pen because we are willing to throw our starters for longer. I think that gives us a bit of an advantage, right? So I could see why, from a managerial perspective, you're a little hesitant. And if you can't get Knack to give you an inning or two, you're probably not going to win the series anyway, because, or at least if you're going to go with a bullpen strategy, right? Because I don't know, like you're going to, that's my perspective. It feels like you're going to burn it out. Do you think they're going to do it again, though? You think
They have to, yeah. I think they've already said they're doing 2 bullpen games probably because they don't have another.
Crazy.
Well, and the problem is, like in game 5, that's going to be coming off of 2 back-to-back games. Like that's the one that's going to be hard. That's the one where they're going to need, like you said, innings from Knack or innings from Honeywell, who did look great today. But like today, I thought was the day where like just try and get through the whole game with the 6 guys you trust. Like because it's like they didn't pitch yesterday except for Hudson. You got a day off tomorrow, and I do think once they fell behind, they probably were like, all right, let's try and like not have the Mets see, Kopech or some of the back guys and like surprise them in New York Series, because that game 5 bullpen one is going to be hard because those guys presumably will have pitched the prior 2 days in some capacity, or at least they hope because they want to win. So I'm not saying that's a punt game, but or I guess is that going to be the Senga game though too? So maybe it's just going to be like a 10-9. They're going to try and outslug.
It depends on if we go Senga. Yeah. There could be a world where
Peterson.
Or we have enough. We have enough guys to be able to. We still have Miguel sitting there. We're not going to start him, but he can give you a couple innings if you need it. The number one thing is a good point that I didn't think about, though, is if they're going to do a bullpen as a second game, taking game 2 makes it that much more important. And so if you go get the win today, now they're in a situation where it's 1-1. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but in a world where we win game, let's say we win the next 2, we go up 3-1. Imagine having to go into game 5 in a bullpen game, especially after we just were successful against it and our hitters have been resilient. That is a daunting scenario where you're like, you're sweating the whole time because you're like, oh my gosh, like what are we going to do? Like it's not that easy to manage, but it's very Dodgers though. It's very Dave Roberts to use that kind of strategy. Either way, though, this is set up to be a great series. Going 1-1 in the first 2, and then 3 in New York. It's going to be electric in Citi Field, especially because we haven't had this in almost 10 years. And having Ohtani and guys like that come into New York, like the amount of media that's going to be there with New York, LA. I mean, this is set up beautifully, like for I guess controlled chaos, if you will. It's going to be really fun.
Yeah. Because the other thing about the Dodgers is like their actual starters aren't really, other than Jack. Like Yamamoto can't give you length right now because he was hurt. He's not fully built up. And Buehler, I just don't think is good enough to give you 6 innings.
Yeah.
If you want to keep the score down. It's a tough spot.
I'm excited, man. I mean, I could yap about this all day. I know we got a little more stuff we want to talk about, but I'll let you give your prediction. I'll give mine, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, similar to the Yankees, I just feel like the Dodgers are going to find a way to get it done.
Fair enough.
So I think they're going to get back to LA down 3-2. I'll say the Mets get 2 of these games, but the Dodgers find a way. They might have to do it late against your bullpen with a couple of comeback victories, and then I think they'll find a way to win game 6 and 7 at home. So Dodgers in 7. Teoscar Hernandez has, I think, I said this months ago, actually, just because this is like one of the most clutch players I think I've seen in a while. So I think he finds a way to have like just a massive home run, maybe in those 6-7 games in LA, or maybe in game like 5 to send them back to LA. I don't know, but some kind of a walk off or game saving homer off Diaz, or just like an insane postseason moment is my bonus prediction.
I like that.
But
I think I mean, obviously, I'm not going to be happy if it happens, but I like
yeah,
that. I like that you're going to ask me a shout out because I think he deserves it. I think that lineup was significantly better with the signing that I think kind of got lost in the fold with everything with Yamamoto and everything else. It was kind of like a later acquisition, but I think it's made their team so much better. Um, it's a bummer because like I'm going to give you a homer pick, but at the same time, I want to dislike the Dodgers because of who they are and what they've been in baseball for so long, but some of their players are so likable. It's like frustrating, right? It's like I
yeah,
can't even be like, like in the series. Obviously, I'll get heated if it comes down to it. But I love Otani. I love Mookie Betts. I love players like that. So this is not going to be an easy task. But I genuinely believe that we have a real shot to win it. Whereas I think like the books and a lot of people aren't giving us that. And we just beat the 3 seed. We just beat the 2 seed, and maybe the team of destiny is going to beat the 1 seed to go to the World Series. I'm going to predict us in 7. What gives me more hope than anything right now is that even though Diaz, walked to the way he closed that game out without letting up a run, and him just saying, "No, I'm just going to go to my fastball," and they couldn't touch it. That gives me way more confidence because in order for us to win the series, we need him to be great, and I think this is going to give him that positive momentum to come out the next time and not, mess around and just attack, and that's going to be a big difference for us because we need him and Stanek to continue to do what he's doing. So I think Mets in 7. That's what I'm gonna go with, and it's
love
gonna
it.
be a fun series, man.
Love it. Apologies if it came off as rude. I decided you made me curious as to how the books were looking at it. Minus 150 Dodgers still right now. It's maybe a little bit of a. I mean, it's a
Oh,
little bit of a
minus 150 to
surprise.
win the series still.
Yeah,
Oh, okay, with us having home field,
I know.
I get it, but I get why they would pick that. But you know,
They're always going to favor the Dodgers. Also, the Yankees are up 3-0 now.
oh really?
It seems like Alex Cobb like walked the entire lineup in the
Oh,
one inning. They had to take him out, but yeah, I guess should we just jump into NFL? It was a crazy college football weekend, but given our length on baseball, maybe it's time to just go NFL. What do you think, or do you have any specific
I think so.
mentions
I
on
think
the?
just a quick shout out to my Gamecocks for an amazing game on the road, and obviously you wanted to. I think you alluded to Alabama being not Saban's Alabama, and I couldn't agree more because the number of errors they made in the last 2 weeks to one have Vanderbilt beat them, which I guess was in Nashville, and then this week to have us go on the road and come so darn close. It's crazy to see with Alabama, but my takeaway will be I'm just happy my Gamecocks came out, and I think we look better this week, a lot better this week than we did last week. So I'm happy about that, and I'll leave it at
Yeah,
that.
that game was ludicrous. Yeah, that game was ludicrous. Yeah, Bam, and also like Kalen DeBoer is like just like smiling and seems like so happy-go-lucky in his post-game interview. Like if that game happened on Saban's watch, like he would be like cursing and like getting into an argument with a sideline. But like he would not have a smile on his face after that game. I mean, against a good team, don't get me wrong. But yeah, that was a mess. It's just like the way you guys just dominated them in the trenches too. Pretty much the entire game was like so not Alabama, but yeah, I don't even know if they're a college football playoff team at this point. Like with how they look, they need to get it together. And
Yeah, it's another wake up call.
quick shout outs. It was just like college football's been so awesome the last few
It's been
weekends.
great. Yeah.
Oregon with a huge win over Ohio State. That was an insane game. And then Penn State. Penn State it's really sneaky this year, but their offense is so much better than in years past. And they found a way to win where they didn't play well against USC, fell behind, but they came back late and won it to overtime. It's a huge win to keep them on track. That is a team to watch that could make some noise in the playoff. And I think those are the main mentions I have. But just another awesome
That's a good
slate.
note. We haven't given them a shout out all year, so I like that.
Yeah.
Note.
And Texas. I mean, Texas is a juggernaut at this point. Oklahoma's bad this year, but the Red River rivalry is always up to something. But
That was an impressive game from them, but next week is about to be the one.
yeah, I think they got them.
Georgia in Texas. It's gonna be a massive one.
Yep. Anyways, I guess we'll jump into what the NFL had to offer here for week 6. me just start it off on Thursday night. I think there were two games this week that were really interesting in terms of divisional matchups that we're going to tell a lot about how the divisions would play out the rest of the year, one of which is happening as we speak. The Jets looks like have a 3-0 lead after one quarter, but or 10-7 lead, a 3-point lead, I should say. But then Thursday night football, San Francisco manhandles Seattle. So that I think puts the division back to where we expected it to be. I think it seems like Seattle's just maybe not as good as a team as they showed the first few weeks. So I don't have a ton on this game, but I do think just to solidify the NFC West and how we view it moving forward, I think that game was big just to have San Francisco look like more like what we expect and Seattle trending back,
Agreed.
To a team that's more average than playoff caliber.
Agreed. You got to hope that Jordan Mason gets healthy though, because Guerrero looked good. It seems like Shanahan finds a way to do it, but they get an injury every week to somebody and then they're figuring it out. But SF looks great again. So
yeah. I think Christian's he'll be back in maybe 3 or 4 weeks. So I think they'll get him back at some point.
That'd be good
in plenty of time. Another game for you. What do you got?
I think especially we're going to spend not as much time on NFL this week. We should jump right into yours. I want to talk Commanders Ravens. What were your thoughts? Like obviously it was close to the end, and then Derrick Henry did Derrick Henry things. I think game on the road for a rookie missing, and the big note for me, at least, I'll say this, and I'll let you have the floor. Is Brian Robinson is so important to this team, and I've been saying it all year, and obviously lost in how amazing Jaden is, and understandably so. He hasn't gotten maybe as much flowers as he should, but I think that was a big difference for you guys this week. Just being able to open up the run game a little bit more, so Jaden wasn't in so many situations where he had to throw against a team that has star players in the defense. So, I'll let you analyze the rest.
Yeah, it kind of went as expected for me. I think I predicted it would be a really close game. I thought the Commanders would play well and be very competitive, which they were. I mean, the Ravens, held them at bay pretty much for most of the game with at least a one-score lead and eventually two. But there were, I think, a couple big losses. You mentioned Brian, not having to be able to run the ball inside, obviously, is huge. We lost a couple key D linemen, unfortunately, today. Jonathan Allen out for the year, so that's a huge loss. But also Dorrance Armstrong ran out, our top edge rusher. And then the refs. I'm not gonna say the refs cost us the game, but there was a pretty lopsided officiating, I thought, in that game as well. And obviously, it's just on the road against a tough opponent. So, but I thought the Commanders played well. But the Ravens, if the Ravens aren't beating themselves, they're just they're such a juggernaut because offensively with Derrick Henry, you don't really have a choice but to stack the box. And from a matchup perspective, obviously it's a nightmare from the Commanders because then you're going one-on-one with, our secondary against Zay Flowers, who, he's not the most complete top receiver in the NFL, but he's in one-on-one coverage, with his speed and shiftiness, he's basically impossible to keep up with. And I'm not a big fan of Bateman, but they also have so much size with the tight ends that they get the story of the game was basically the Commanders were all right, we're going to try and stop Henry. And, they did an okay job to an extent. He still got 120 yards, but,
but 130 yards and it felt like
it felt quiet. Yeah.
Yeah.
A quiet 130, but, and then just St. Juice could not cover Flowers. And obviously everyone's giving St. Juice a hard time and, he got abused in that game, but from a matchup perspective, I don't think people realize how hard it is for any corner in this league to go one-on-one with how good these receivers are and how you can't play physical at all in today's NFL. So he didn't play well, don't get me wrong, but I don't really want to give him that hard of a time when it's just one-on-one on the outside. He picked up some cheapy penalties. But yeah, Jaden was amazing.
Yeah.
I'm
not going to I've talked about your secondary in the past. I think that's going to be and obviously, hopefully, with John out, I know you guys drafted a lineman, so hopefully he'll be able to step up and help a little bit. But the issue is going to be your secondary when it comes down to playing these great teams. You're right. Obviously, it was a tough matchup for any corner, but the thing is that I would give him more of a pass for it if he's been great throughout the course of his career. But the issue is I'm not going to put it on St. Juice as much as I'm going to on your prior general management for just making bad draft picks, man. Since you've drafted those great linemen, those defensive guys that you've added, it's not a knock against them. It's just you had an opportunity to get Christian Gonzalez, you didn't. And then Evan Forbes didn't even start. Emmanuel Forbes didn't even start this game. Like
He wasn't even active.
that's that's my point.
He was a
That
healthy
is
scratch.
totally, that's so crazy to think about. Like, and yeah, of course, with Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, and you worried about both those guys running, it's chaos. One thing I'll give you guys credit for is you managed to maybe Dante Fowler deserves a lot of credit for this, and probably your linebackers, but keeping Lamar from destroying you with those hanging out in the pocket for like an hour and then avoiding like 8 tackles and throwing it. Like he didn't have too many of those against you. But I guess maybe they took a more like even kill approach. And again, it's what we said at the beginning of the year. If they can run the ball with Derrick Henry and give him the carries that he deserves, that's what they should be doing. That is how you set your team up for success, and Lamar's life gets a lot easier. And that's what they did this weekend. It's not a bad game for the Commanders. It's just a good game for the Ravens at home. And it's a learning experience. I mean, Jaden played well, I think. And also, shout out Terry McLaurin, bro.
That catch.
This man has been waiting for a quarterback to consistently throw him the ball, and now he's showing you what he's capable of. I'm just so happy for him because the poor guy has been trying everything he can to get these opportunities, and he finally is. And he is showing up in the moments when you need him to the most. So some of those plays were crazy.
Yeah, and I think the most exciting thing that came out of this game is just like the reaction of the Commanders players after, where like in past year's teams, like Commanders players would be so happy with like moral victories, and it's like, oh, we played a close game against a good team, and it'd be like a positive narrative in the locker room, and like that's such a loser's mentality. But this year's team with the new coaching staff and just Jaden's personality as a whole, like they were pissed they lost. Like even though the Ravens are one of the best teams in the league on the road, all that, but they like, they expect to win every single time they're on the field, which is exactly what you need to be if you're going to be a good team. And, they knew they had some areas they could have played better. So I think that just that kind of mentality is such a huge culture shift and is really good to see.
I mean, we could mention to you how much it benefits you guys even after a loss that the Cowboys decided to just like do absolutely nothing yesterday afternoon. That was like, listen, I expected the Lions to win that game, but for them to go into Dallas and it felt like they were like practicing out there. You know what I mean? They're like, oh, hey, let's get JMO some reps. So let's go get, Amon-Ra some reps. Let's go get Jahmyr Gibbs some reps. Let's go get David Montgomery, who, by the way, David Montgomery is such a dog. It is every single time I watch him play, he always manages to like blow my mind with some sort of broken tackle or something where he gets like 5 extra yards on a play that he shouldn't. It's funny because Jahmyr is obviously so good and so talented that, sometimes he gets lost in that equation, but he is so important to that team. And the way they've constructed that offense, where it's not like they go David for 2 plays and then Jahmyr for 2 plays, they just give them drives, which is so genius because it keeps them both fresh, but it also gives them both momentum rather than like taking away from each other. It's just genius, man. And JMO looks amazing. He only needs like 2 catches a game to completely, take a whole thing out. I just want to take a moment and say, I just feel so bad about Aiden Hutchinson, though. You know what I mean? Like, that's the one. He is so important to that team. I'm glad. It seems like when he left, he was doing better, but it was like a scary injury. And he's been such an amazing, like, draft pick for them. Football is missing a great player, and I hope he, comes back healthy sooner rather than later. But that's the big thing. I'll let you talk about the Cowboys, though. I'll give the flowers. You feel free to enjoy your Commanders, bias.
Yeah.
Cowboys.
Yeah, I was leaning to thinking the Cowboys maybe were going to be able to kind of salvage this year and be decent. I think that any thoughts of that is completely dead. Like the strength of the NFC this year from a depth perspective, I think they're basically screwed at this point. I don't see a world where they're making the playoffs. There might be an overreaction to one game, but I mean, having to go through the Eagles and now the Commanders in the division, I think is going to be tough. And then I don't think there's going to be a wild card from this division either. So I think they're dead on arrival here, and the Lions took offense to the fact that they lost on that David Skipper ineligible receiver game last year, and they decided to just bury the Cowboys. And it was unfortunately I couldn't watch that game because I was heading over to tailgate the Giants game, but I just good to see the score on that one. And Aiden Hutchinson is such a huge loss though. Like
it is.
Because their defense is good and it's gotten to be very good, but part of that is just the havoc he can wreak. I mean, he's truly turned into one of those elite edge rushers, like, not on TJ Watt's level, but like the kind of guy that can truly take over a game, which is so huge for them and helps their secondary so much. So I don't think you can underestimate how big that loss is going to be for them. So we'll see, maybe a Max Crosby. He's mentioned he wants to go to the Lions, and I don't know what his contract situation is, but if it's a 1-year situation, then he could maybe stem that tide. So I don't know, but it's just such a massive loss for Detroit, which is just
Real
like
quick, I know you didn't watch the game, but did you see the highlight of them trying to throw back to the lineman that
yes.
And the funniest part was he was completely covered, and Goff was like, "Nah, screw it, I'm gonna throw it to him anyway."
I'm gonna fit this window here.
We're gonna try this. It was hilarious. I thought that was
Yeah.
clearly they were just trying to rub salt in the wound at that point.
And
I get it. I mean, last year was such a disappointment. And real quick, speaking of guys doing extraordinary things, I was curious. Did you get to watch or see what happened with the Bears game at all?
I watched most of the Bears game. Yep.
The Cole Kmet situation.
Oh, yeah.
Him scoring 2 touchdowns and then snapping the long snap is that I've never heard of that. That's hilarious. Yeah. I mean, there's more to talk about. Obviously, Caleb, another great game in back-to-back weeks. Keenan Allen getting involved. That team is starting to get scarier and scarier by the week. If Caleb continues this trajectory, turns into a second half, like he's in that trajectory to become really, really good by the end of the year. There's not really many weaknesses on that team, and DeAndre Swift looks good too. So I want to get your quick thoughts if you watch any of that.
Yeah, the Bears are legit. I mean, the Jaguars are horrendous. That's a whole nother story. But the Bears are big time legit. I predicted them making the playoffs going into the season, and I feel even better about their team than I did then, obviously, perhaps. But I also almost feel worse about their playoff chances with how darn good the NFC is.
I know.
But yeah, they're big time. Like they have one of the best defenses in the sport, and not just a defense that keeps you off the board, but can take you, turn you over and score points for themselves. And Caleb looks great right now. The offense as a whole. I mean, there's not much not to like about the Bears right now, and what's clearly the best division in football. One of the best divisions I've ever seen. With how good all 4 of those teams are. So. It's gonna be interesting to see how that one plays out. I don't know how the schedules work for each of those teams, but
what are the odds we get a year where every single team from a division makes playoffs?
I don't see how that's possible.
Is that statistically possible?
I can't imagine it is. Have there been many division games in that? I mean, I know the Packers played the Vikings. Detroit plays the Vikings this week, but otherwise, I don't think there's been many division games. So they're going to start beating each other up here soon.
You would need quite a bit of splits for it to happen, but if there was ever a year, this is the year, because I don't all of those teams are in a position where they really could win a lot outside of their division, right? Because they're just good. They have all these teams have redeeming qualities about them. The Packers had a great week, man. They basically controlled that game from the moment it started against the Cardinals. I think they're only going to get better. They had some cobwebs. Jordan Love has been, when he got hurt, he hasn't been the best up in the entire time, but he's starting to get back into that form of who he was in the playoffs last year. You saw Christian Watson get involved. You saw, it's ridiculous. They have so many guys. We know about the Vikings, and we just talked about the Lions, who, this week look like the best team in the NFL, at least for the week. So I don't know. I mean, if it happens, it wouldn't be if there was ever a year, it'd be this year.
Well, running picks, we have some huge news, my friend. Looking at last week's results, I think I'd put it in the group chat, but Mr. Cy here is a Jets victory tonight away from a 14-0 perfect week.
Bam.
How about that? Now, granted, all the favorites have won up to this point, and your one upset is the one on the board right now. Oh, it looks like the Bills just scored, so the Bills took the lead. But yeah, if you can get a perfect week, albeit with all favorites, but hey, there were a couple close calls on the board, so incredible week. Zach got 12 out of 14. I got 11 out of 14, so everyone did really well. But Cy has opened up a pretty good lead here year to date.
I'm not generally a big fan of picking all favorites every week. I like my upsets, but this was one of those weird weeks where it just felt
right.
It just felt right. There was a lot of good matchups. So hopefully the Jets pull it off, because I don't know if we've done that yet at MDS, but that's great. I'll take it.
I don't think so. Yep. Also, Vegas, they tend to hone in and do a better job by the middle of the season on who should be favored. So, I'll give credit where credit is due to the Las Vegas bookies as to picking the right teams. But anyways, we'll start it off on Thursday Night Football, Denver at New Orleans. Denver's actually a 1.5 point favorite on the road. Over-under is 37.5. You can start us off there.
You said Denver is a 1.5 favorite in New Orleans.
That's correct.
I'm going to take the Saints this week. I know the second half they didn't look too great, but I don't think Denver is that good that they're going to go on the road and beat the Saints.
Yeah, my spread prediction for this was New Orleans minus 3.5. So I usually am very close and good at predicting the spreads. I don't know what happened here this week. I mean, Denver, I thought they were maybe becoming a decent team, and then they just got curb stomped by the Chargers, So I don't really know what to make of them.
You know what? Maybe, not to cut you off, but Chris Olave might not come back because
he's probably out. Yeah.
Short week, and then obviously Rattler it's a second start ever, so it might be as a result of the injuries that the Saints.
It definitely contributes, yeah. But like Rattler looks good when he wasn't like trying to chase down points because Baker was just unbelievable. So, yeah. Anyway, I don't know, weird spread. Anyway, back to London. The Patriots are heading over across the pond with Drake May to play Jacksonville, who just stays from last week. Jacksonville's got a 5.5 point spread advantage here. Over under is 42.5. I had this one way off too. I had it at like 2.5. Maybe it's because Jacksonville didn't have to travel and they just stayed over there. But I'll say Jacksonville does sneak out a win, but I have no cover. I'm taking those 5.5 points.
Yeah, I'm never going to pick a spread for Jacksonville for the rest of the year unless they completely turn it around. So I'm just going to think they win but no cover. I mean, it'll be weird though for Drake May to go on his second game after go to London. That's weird, man.
Yeah, that's a little wild. Next game, 1 p.m. games, Philly at the Giants at MetLife. Philly's a 3.5 point favorite on the road. Over-under is 42.5. You can start us off.
Yeah, give me Philly's win and cover.
Yeah, I have the same. The Giants will muck it up and make it close, but I think Philly will pull it out.
Hopefully they get Malik back, yeah.
Yeah, hopefully. Seattle at Atlanta at 1 p.m. Atlanta's a 3-point favorite at home. I had this one at like 5.5, so I'm surprised it's only 3. So I definitely have Atlanta winning cover at home.
Yeah, I like Atlanta by a touchdown. I'm with you.
Yep. Tennessee at Buffalo. Buffalo, it opened there. It was 8.5 points at home, but that's subject to change with their performance tonight. Over under is 42.5. Start us off.
I'm probably going to take Buffalo no matter what you tell me the spread is, just given that they couldn't beat my Colts with half our team out. So, yeah. I'm going to take Buffalo by a lot.
Yeah, I'll say Buffalo winning covers. I can't imagine it'll change a whole lot based on tonight. But Cincinnati at Cleveland. Cincinnati's a 5.5 point favorite on the road. Over under is 43.5. Start us off.
Cincy winning cover.
I have no cover. I debated taking the Browns to take a random win, but that just seems reckless. So I'll say Cincinnati wins but doesn't cover. I'm just not a fan of the Bengals right now. Their pass blocking was horrible last night. The Giants were in Burrow's face all night. So I think they're going to struggle to block Myles Garrett. Houston at Green Bay. This is a huge game. Awesome. Going to be fun to watch. Green Bay is a 2.5 point favorite at Lambeau. Over under is 47.5. Tough one. I agree with the spread, but give me the Texans to pull off a big road win.
Yeah, this is such a toss-up. The main reason I'm going to pick Green Bay is no Nico Collins, and I think the Green Bay offense is just going to be great at home. So I'll take Green Bay to win and cover.
Yep. Dolphins at Colts. Colts are 3.5 point favorites at home. I'll say Colts win and cover.
Yeah, Colts win and cover.
And then just a huge, awesome 1 p.m. game here. Lions at Vikings. Vikings are 2.5 point favorites at home, coming off of the bye. How about you go for it first?
I'm going to be surprised if this isn't consensus, but I think, especially after this last week, it's hard not to give the Lions their flowers. So I'm going to take them to win, even though the Vikings have looked very good so far. I'm going to go Lions to win.
I think it's going to be kind of a trap because the Vikings are coming off a bye. That Aiden Hutchinson loss is going to be huge. Everyone's going to be all hyped up on the Lions' performance. I am going to take Detroit partially because I picked them to win the NFC and have the best record going into the year. And it might become challenging to do this if they lose this one, even though it's the road iteration of this matchup. So I think it's going to be a great game. I lean to this being a trap and maybe Minnesota's going to win, but I am going to take Detroit on the money line here. Next game, Carolina at Washington, 4:00. Washington's a 7.5 point favorite at home. Over under is 52.5, biggest of the week. Go for it.
I'm pretty much going to say anytime Carolina's on the road playing a team, I'm just going to take that a home team to cover.
Yeah, I'll say Commies winning cover.
Yeah.
Actually, I have no cover. I put no cover. I don't know. I think maybe might be a hangover game, and the Panthers were covered late. I think maybe it's my logic, but
I don't think you guys are any longer a hangover team. I think it's going to be like we need to go for the statement. Yeah,
everyone has a good hangover game. We'll see. Also looking forward to a matchup with Caleb Williams, perhaps the week after, which would be fun. Not to preview next week, but Rams are at home with the Raiders coming in. Rams are 5.5 point favorites. I will say Rams win and cover.
Yeah, Rams win and cover. I'm not going to waste time on this one.
And then a Super Bowl rematch. How about this in Week 7 rematch of the Super Bowl? Kansas City is going to San Francisco. San Francisco is favored by 1.5 points at home. Similar spread to the Super Bowl, if I'm not mistaken. I forget what it closed at, but I will say San Francisco. Even though it's Kansas City off a bye, Kansas City's due for a loss. They've been kind of lucky this year in a lot of their games. So I'll say San Francisco finds a way to win at home.
I said a couple weeks ago when I teased it to mess with the Falcons fans that once a year I will pick against Kansas City. Only once a year will I allow myself to do it. It will be this week, simply because of the million injuries that they have. I still think it'll be crazy close. I still think it'll be a great game. But with it being in SF and them having lost in the Super Bowl in overtime, like I just think the vengeance that they're going to have, like at home, will get them just slightly over the top. So I apologize, Mahomes, but this will be the 1 week I'm picking against you.
And then Sunday Night Football, we have an absolute banger, as we always do on Sunday Night Football. Just like last night, we have the New York Jets at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Steelers are 1.5.
Me, bro? Someone explain to me how Kansas City, San Francisco didn't get a primetime game when they both were just in the Super Bowl. Like, how does the NFL do that? I know I'm going on a tangent, but this is so frustrating, man. Like, if I see another stupid Cowboys or Giants game or Pittsburgh or whatever in primetime, I'm going to lose my mind. I'm so tired of this.
Well, and the thing that bothers me most about it is Kansas City is the other team, obviously, because they've, back-to-back Super Bowl champs and all that Taylor Swift, that gets like an insane amount of primetime coverage, and I get very bored of them. And then this is the one time they don't. Like, this is...
it makes no sense.
It's like... so we picked Pittsburgh. I picked Pittsburgh to win and cover.
Remind me, is it Pittsburgh and who?
It's Jets.
And what's the...
1.5. Pittsburgh 1.5. Yep.
I'm going to take the Jets to win. I think the Pittsburgh's kind of like up and down for me. I think the Jets take that
one. Good Monday night game. Baltimore at Tampa Bay. Baltimore is a 3.5 point favorite on the road. Over under is 48.5. Baltimore is just such a nightmare for NFC teams because they don't see Lamar very much and it's so hard to prepare. So I'll take Baltimore to win and cover.
I'm going to take Baltimore to win and cover, but I'm going to give you your flowers because the Buccaneers are infinitely better than I thought they would be this year. And Baker and Chris Godwin, man. Chris Godwin deserves so many flowers, man. It's absurd how good that team is. They have 3 running backs that all ate this weekend, but I got to give Baltimore their flowers, but I'm going to stop sleeping on the Buccaneers. I agree with you.
Yeah, my take, Tampa Bay has an argument as the best team in the NFC, I think. I think you have to give it to Minnesota with how they played, but I mean, Tampa Bay has beaten Detroit on the road. And they had the one game with Atlanta, but they kind of blew that game. And they also had major secondary injuries for that game, which allowed Kirk to just shred them. And those guys are healthy now. Tampa Bay is so good.
I think their defense is the one thing that is, I think, still susceptible throughout the course of a year. But yeah, I mean, when you score that many points, I guess you can do all right.
Yeah. Anyways, last game of the week, Chargers at Cardinals. Chargers are actually 2.5 point favorites on the road. Over under is 43.5. How about you start us off?
I'm actually going to take Chargers. I like this Jim Harbaugh Chargers team, man. They're consistent and they play smart. The problem with the Cardinals is I can't figure them out. It's like 1 week they're good, 1 week they're off. It's hard for me to pick them.
Yeah, I'm struggling a little bit with the Chargers this year. I think just in terms of analyzing and understanding and betting them. I have Arizona pulling one of their random wins here. At home, getting points. So I have Arizona on the money line, but honestly, you're probably right. All right.
That's the board. Quick thing that Dasky pointed out to me to close out this episode. He was asking me if I saw Chris Long's analysis of the Lions and the post Lions hangover. It won't apply this week because the Cowboys are obviously on a bye. But I don't know if you saw this, Evan, but there's Chris Long pointed out that because of how many like weapons the Lions
Uh,
have and how much they bruise like teams up with their physical play, like guys like David Montgomery and some of their defensive guys. The teams that play the Lions, whether they win or lose, usually the week after, like have a definitively have hangover games, and there's like real evidence to prove this because there's been a lot of teams that afterwards have like lost the next game against teams that they should, in a against what Vegas and everything should easily beat. So it's one thing for us to keep an eye out on a betting perspective because I think they've hit every single week like in terms of like the pick accordingly. So it's a funny note that I wanted to mention.
yeah, I think that's it. We'll probably log off and see who takes control of the AFC East with this big game that's approaching halftime. But any last words before we
No, I mean,
cut for the week?
great episode. We missed Zach, but I'm glad we got to talk some baseball, man.
Yeah,
I think the MLB deserved a shout out, and let's go Mets. And yeah,
yeah,
looking forward to more quality football this week too. I'll leave it at that.
love it. Yeah, good luck to your Mets. We'll see what happens. But
Thanks, man.
thanks everyone for tuning in. As always, let us know what you think in the various comments or social media forums. And that was Mondays Down South.